Hi, Tony.
Hello, Dr. Shanti. Good to see you.
Hello, Dr. Santlova. Good to see you.
Hello, Alemo. Good to see you. Thank you for joining.
Yes, it's my pleasure to join you as usual.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. That's highly appreciated.
Thank you, doctor.
Can you hear me well, Alemo? How is the sound? Is it good?
Yes, I can hear you very well. The sound is good.
Good, excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Tony, I sent you a presentation. It's just a couple of slides. Basically, it's just some data statistics from US about women in higher education. So if you take a look at it, and that'll be my springboard to my little conversation.
Lovely. Dr. Shanti, would you like me to share or you can share it?
I can share it. I just wanted you to have it.
Okay, that's
In case I
brilliant.
run into trouble.
Yes, because I think we are going to have, at our Research Institute Moodle shell, the folders for each session with the presentations because I'm collecting them.
Very good.
From previous sessions as well. So that's appreciated. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. By the way, I'll present it because I have to cite where I got the information from. It's from Inside Higher Ed.
That's actually important since,
yes
we are uploading, right? There's a session.
Yeah, so I wanted to cite it. If you're uploading the session, I want to cite it.
That's great. Thank you. Hello, Mashilu. Good to see you. How are you?
Good afternoon, Dr. Anthony. I'm fine. Thank you, sir, and the colleagues.
Thank you. Good to see you. So I hope that you're going to share with us your ideas about gender roles and gender equality, Mashilu. Promise?
Okay.
Please do. That's the platform for academic freedom, Mashilu. So any views, any opinions are highly appreciated. I mean it.
Not prepared, but because it's a daily story, I'll give my best opinion.
Thank you, Mashilu. That's wonderful. Yes, because actually, when only women talk about gender rights and gender equality, it's not, how can I put it? Not the whole picture is covered, right? Yes. Both halves of the population should actually participate in the discussion. I think that's a must. Definitely. That's brilliant. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. I'm fine, Kathy. Thank you so much. Kathy, would you like to change your title? I mean, your name as Kathy, or you prefer Kathleen? How would you prefer?
You can call me Kathy. My name is Kathleen, but you can call me Kathy.
Oh,
I only answer to Kathleen when you're mad at me. My mother used to, Kathleen, get down here. I knew I'd done something wrong. That's
what my children say. They say that I use their full names when I'm angry with them.
Exactly.
So that's usually the pattern. Hi, Martin. Hi, Helen. Good to see you there. Helen, I think you should tell Martin to change the label, that's not only Martin Scalway, but also Helen is there. Martin, what about that? Changing the label, gender equality. even in minor things, it should start in minor things, should be seen in minor things as well.
Well,
Martin,
this is my computer, but
how-
I don't know how to change my name mid-collection. I'll try.
well, these are property rights already, right? So it's kind of another domain. Could be interesting. Hi, Shelter. Good to see you.
Hey,
So-
hi, doctor.
Hi. So there are two of you there. Good. Excellent. Shelter, I mean, gentlemen, are you in the UK now? Are you in England?
We're in Mansfield College.
We're actually in Oxford University in Mansfield College, and we just checked in this afternoon, and we want to be part of this colloquium because it's one of the learning platforms for us, and we cannot miss it. Thank you.
That's wonderful. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Hussein, lovely to see you.
Good to see you.
Hello, Hussein. Hussein is joining from Saudi Arabia, right, Hussein? So that would be very interesting to listen to your opinion about the matter.
Okay.
That's brilliant. We have gentlemen joining. That's great. And of course, Professor Gilbert. Neil, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining. I know you're joining from California, US, so it's morning.
Yes, it's good morning from here. Yes.
Good morning. Good morning. That's great. That's absolutely lovely. Right. Okay. So I see people are joining, and that's very encouraging and inspiring. So I will start slowly if you let me. Let's do that. So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you very much again for joining us on Sunday. That's already a tradition. So you know that here in the UK, in Britain, we love traditions. We're all about traditions. So that's a very good tradition that you know, UBIS University brings to all of you. I would say through this experience, we make the world closer. And actually we make the world flatter, I would say as well, because that's kind of the most exciting experience of meeting all of you and discussing the issues of great importance for the world with you, with your specifically individual experience that you bring to these sessions, and I'm very grateful for this. So in order to start today's session, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Antonina Santilova, and I'm a chair of DBA program at UBIS University, and that's my honor and pleasure. I'm really happy to welcome our speakers, keynote speakers today. And I'm pleased to announce that today we would have the pleasure of meeting the leadership of UBIS, and that's our CEO and founder, Kathy Raffaelli. Kathy, if you
Hi.
wave, that's great. And thank you very much, Kathy, for joining. And Dr. Shanti Konkos. Dr. Shanti, thank you very much for joining us as well, interim provost of UBIS. Thank you, ladies, both. Also, we have an expert today on board, and that's Professor of Social Welfare, Berkeley, the University of California, Professor Neil Gilbert. Neil, if you wave as well, yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. So, you know, usually we prefer kind of not really to claim that we have the experts, right? Or the connoisseurs of this or that issue. And that's how we appreciate and value every single opinion and every single question mentioned. But today we have an expert, and that's quite amazing because Professor Gilbert actually is the author of 15 books published about the questions of social welfare and welfare states and social policies. So any questions we have, we can ask today and, you know, hear his opinion on this. Also, I welcome UBIS students. Of course, you are the most important participants and the keynote speakers among you. And that, Diana, I can't see you. Diana Thielu, can you? Yeah, Diana.
I'm here.
Diana Thielu, lovely, Diana, to meet you. So, Diana, remind me, what country are you joining from?
Okay, usually I'm in Kenya, but right now I'm traveling, so I'm in Zambia.
So you're in Zambia.
So I'm in Lusaka. Yes,
that's
Zambia.
great. That's great to mention, Diana. So Diana is
Yeah.
a group leader in retail industry, and she's a young mother with a baby. So congratulations, Diana. That would be amazing to listen to you today. And also, I do hope that our students, you know, all genders, single, married, any status. With the children, without, that you all share your thoughts and opinions with us today. Okay, in order to start today's discussion, actually kind of the overarching theme of today's discussion is gender gap in employment. So if you don't mind, I'll share my screen very quickly just to show a couple of slides to you. Hold on a second, so that should be here. I'm turning to the international. I hope that you can see my screen. Thank you very much. So I'm turning to International Labor Organization, and that's pictures, you know, presentation that anybody can upload from their website, ilo.org. From this particular slide, you can see that when we talk about the global gap, the current global labor force participation rate for women is just under 47%. For men, it is a 72%. That's the difference, right, of 25 percentage points, which can be really different from area to area. And some areas, you know, this gap can make up to 50 percentage points. So the situation is like that. So it's definitely the gender gap in employment is definitely that. Talking about employment, anyone who is employed or actively seeking employment is considered, you know, to be employed. Talking about the qualitative side of employment, again, what we see across the world, that women who want to work have a harder time finding a job than men. This problem is particularly marked in Northern Africa and the Arab states, where unemployment rates for women exceed 20%. If we keep moving, so what we can see, why this matters, why it's kind of a matter of great importance nowadays, and you know, nowadays in particular, the freedom to work, of course, it is an integral part of human welfare, and there are multiple studies telling us and proving that. Talking about the issue from an economic perspective, reducing these gender gaps in labor force participation could substantially boost global GDP, i.e. Per country GDP as well. So what we see that, you know, of course, all countries in the world are interested, you know, in kind of living better, living richer, and it's absolutely not possible any longer to you know, to ignore the significant half of the population of the countries, and women are immensely important contributors, right, to the economic prosperity of the countries, and that goes without saying. And again, there are studies. So, but a very important question, but what do women want? Again, many different studies, not only academic studies, but also, you remember, you know, Hollywood and all these movie making companies, they turn to this question from time to time. And however, the studies show that a staggering 70% of women, regardless of their current status of employment, they prefer to work outside their household, prefer to work in paid labor, right, and paid jobs. Moving forward, since kind of that's the contradiction, right? So we still have this gap. We still see that, you know, under half of women across the world, they actually are employed. At the same time, over 70% would like to be employed employed. So something must be going on here. Something must be wrong, that maybe should be corrected, maybe should be adjusted through the policies, through different means. So talking about the power and the women's preferences, what we see that no matter what a woman might like to choose, her decision, her preference is still heavily influenced by socioeconomic constraints and also pressure to conform to traditional gender roles. And these traditional gender roles, I think, is a kind of one of the themes I believe that we are going to talk and discuss today. Okay, so that's very briefly. I want to just kind of to sketch the picture that we are going to talk about today. And my next point, 3 minutes video, delivered by Jordan Patterson. That's a Canadian psychiatrist, clinical psychiatrist, and also a professor of the University of Toronto, who's well known. Actually, he's an influencer and he's a YouTube star at the moment. Why, you will understand in a second. I'm not going to spoil his short talk, but from the title indicated here, you can see that Professor Peterson claims that maybe we women are being lied to. Lied in regard to what you're going to hear now. So 3 minutes of your attention, please.
What's the relative importance of career and motherhood in a typical woman's life? I'm 55, and I've been working with men and women my entire life, and I've watched this, and it's quite obvious. It's like at 19, it's all career. By 30, that's just not the case. It's not the case. I don't know if I've seen a single woman who I didn't think had a psychological problem, who hadn't seriously flipped in their attitude towards the balance of family and career by the time they were 30. And then you see lots of women who at 40 haven't had kids and perhaps wanted to, and that's not a pleasant situation. I was talking to a woman who is about 39, a professional woman, attractive, well put together, competent, well educated, successful in her profession, unmarried, in a relationship with an older guy, but unmarried, and desperate to have a child. She said no one ever talked to her about the fact that she'd actually want to have a family or encouraged her to think about doing that. It was as if it wasn't within the realm of possibility that one of the things that she might have the ambition to do would be to be a mother. And that's just not acceptable. And it was like she woke up in her late 30s and thought, well, the first thing she thought was, this profession of mine is actually nowhere near as comprehensively fulfilling as the advertisements claimed, which is something that virtually everyone discovers as they move forward in their professional career. The reason that you get paid generally for your work is because you're doing something that you wouldn't choose to do if you weren't being paid for it. And so the idea that your career is going to be the fundamental source of your fulfillment is true for a very tiny minority of people. And even with them, it's complicated. So she was tearful and upset about the fact that it took her so long to discover that there were other important dimensions to life, and that motherhood turns out to be, well, how many things do you do in your life that are fundamental, right? You have a career and your education, so that would be part of your career development. That's part of what makes you generally useful in society, and perhaps a place that you find some meaning and purpose. You have your friends, you have your family, like your parents and your siblings and so forth. You have your kids, you have your relationship. That's it. There's 4 things. Now, you can expand that to some degree. You can have, maybe you're creative and you make good use of your personal time. There's other factors that aren't trivial, but those 4 things are canonically important. You miss one of them and you're going to pay for it. And so our society needs to rethink our relative valuation of career versus motherhood. So we don't know how to solve this problem, but we could at least have an intelligent discussion about it. And we could start by admitting that the idea that most 19-year-old women are fed, which is that their career will be the primary purpose of their life, is actually a lie.
So that is the video I wanted to offer in order to initiate today's discussion. It's not that we are supposed really to address or, you know, to kind of object to the statement by Professor Patterson. Okay, but I just wanted to say that I'm muting a person.
Hopefully now setting up.
Right. But throughout the stages of our lives, we as women actually are presented with so many narratives about, you know, who we are supposed to be, what we are supposed to look like, what path we are supposed to follow, right? But the truth is that actually, you know, those who we perceive successful women, we perceive as leaders, and we have 2 leaders I invited today to share their opinions with us. I actually would cherish their suggestion and you know, their vision, how they managed to pave their own path to the successful careers and, you know, to I believe fulfilling lives they have, right? So that would be precious. So Kathy, Shanti, the floor is yours. So who goes first? Please share with us, and then we will have the questions and, you know, kind of more ideas shared. Okay, Kathy, would you like to go first?
Sure. So first, thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here and to see all these faces, men and women. I'm so glad there are men joining us because we're all half the problem and half the solution, right? The first thing I want to say is that when Antonina sent me Dr. Peterson's remarks, I was fairly outraged. So I've had a chance to calm down a bit, but I find that Dr. Peterson takes a very complex social and economic issue and distills it down into a social media soundbite. And in doing so, I think he does a great disservice to women. Surely as a scientist, he knows better, which is more offensive to me. For example, he ignores basic biology. What any of us wanted at 19 was not what we wanted at 30, and arguably isn't what we want at 40 or 50, or now I'm in my 60s. And so that's just silly. The second thing is he makes the assertion that someone's lying. Well, who is that? That's very inflammatory. In fact, I find many of the messages that permeate media and dialogue today still put pressure on young women to go in the opposite direction. Things about being thin, being pretty, catching a husband. You know, those are messages that are deleterious to women and certainly don't talk at all to intellectual advancement, career avocations, etc. The third is he exhibited some extreme professional bias. He's a psychiatrist, or he doesn't see happy people. You don't go to a psychiatrist when you're happy. So he has a bias, and you all as DBA students should know that to draw conclusions based on a data set that's biased is grossly in error. And then the last thing is, I think he minimizes sort of personal responsibility and the fact that people can love their work. I mean, certainly in any life journey, there are days you love being a mother and days you don't, and days you love your work and days you don't. But to say with sort of, you know, absolute authority that people don't love their work is silly. It's disingenuous. I do think there is a pressure to conform. And I do believe that that pressure to conform depends on what societal influences you have. And I'm keenly aware of the fact that in many parts of the world, there is an individualistic culture, which says, figure out what you want to be authentic. And in other parts of the world, there is a collectivist culture. And I think that those two different cultures put different pressures on men and women in their life journey. However, you cannot ignore 50% of the population economically and expect to thrive. There was a great book I read years ago by Dr. Bernard Malmud, who is the Princeton professor of Islamic studies at Princeton. And he talked about the fact that the Islamic culture flourished for many, many years, and then all of a sudden didn't. And he correlated the fact that when the culture stopped flourishing in the way that it had previously, it was because at that moment in time, the leadership decided that women were no longer to be educated, that women were no longer to be out in front. And so I think that that book, if you have a chance, it's actually a short read, is extremely helpful to this dialogue, as it distills the fact that when you take 50% of your population and you put them in the proverbial kitchen, your economic productivity declines, your art declines, your literature declines, any measure of the flourishing of society will decline if 50% of your population isn't allowed to participate. In terms of the last question Antonina, raised, there is a pressure to conform, but let's face it, most pressures start with you. They start with, what are your values? What is your authenticity? And what is the guilt that you're going to lay on yourself? The second pressure that I experienced in my career was from women who made alternative choices. Believe it or not, it wasn't the guys that gave me pressure at all. It was the women. And so if a woman chose to be a homemaker and stayed home with her children, there was this tension that evolved on, well, you made a different choice than I did. And so there was this justification that evolved on one's choices. And then the third pressure was always the extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody has an opinion. And I found that the best way to deal with all those pressures was first to analyze what made me happy, because I think we would all sit here and agree, happy mothers and dads make happy children. If you're sad, if you're depressed, it's going to be hard, irrespective of what role you've taken, to convey happiness to your children. The second was to disarm people by asking them how to help, how you could balance. You disarm people when you ask them for their help. And so I tried a lot to disarm my relatives who would have chosen a different path and did choose different paths. Also acknowledging that they had a different perspective, not getting dug in and firmly entrenched into my own perspective. Those were all helpful strategies to cope with the pressure. But I definitely had strategies that I used, and I'll share them today. These are, for what it's worth, Kathy's top 10 tips. The first is that you have to have great childcare. You just have to. If you don't have great childcare, you are worrying every minute, whether you're a mom or dad. My husband worried equally. And you have to have backup. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is find a job you love. Don't just do a job. Now I realize that economically that's not possible at every move in the career ladder, but that's why I'm in education, because when you educate a person, you change 5 lives. And when you help educate, you can help someone make an intelligent decision to find the job they love. The third tip was outsource, 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 outsource. You have to allow others to help you. You have to hire help. I remember I'd been made, and this is a true story, senior vice president of Chemical Bank, one of the first youngest female senior VPs. And there I was at 10 o'clock at night, scrubbing my kitchen floor on my hands and knees. And I had this epiphany. Why am I doing this? Why am I, was it an arrogance? Was it I have to be, scrubbing the floor to prove something? I got up the next day and called maid services and found a maid. The next tip, number 4, is plan and do things in advance. You have to have a family calendar. You have to be organized. It's when you're not organized that it all goes to Hades. The 5th tip would be to build a lot of rituals with your family and kids. Make your work part of their experience. Let them know why you're doing what you do, why it's important to you, which kind of goes to the next comment tip, the next tip, which is communicate. You've got to communicate to your children. You have to have intelligent conversations, but you also have to communicate to your boss. You can't be intimidated with your boss. Tip number 6 or 7, I've lost track of tips. You have to have emergency and contingency plans for both work and home. And whether it's a trusted ally at work, where you can call them up at 6 o'clock in the morning and say, I cannot come in. My child is running 103 fever. Or whether it's at home where you were supposed to bake cupcakes and you forgot, and you're going to have to go to Shop and Stop or whatever the grocery store of your choice is. The next tip I would say is you've got to learn to say no. That is, in fact, in some ways for women, a big issue. Men learn to say no, I think, a little easier because of team sports and being on the sports field and sort of learning to prioritize, learning to listen. I think women are less trained at very early ages to say no. And that's certainly something that I think society is addressing now. But you also have to say no without guilt, because guilt will eat you alive. Next tip, prioritize and simplify. You can have it all. You cannot have it all at once. You have to pick your moments. You have to choose not to clean the house. You have to choose not to do that extra little project at work that, quite frankly, might not be important. So you've got to pick your poison. And then the last is you've got to prioritize you. I think one of the biggest issues for moms and dads on this phone call, on this Zoom meeting, is you've got to make time for you. You've got to unplug. You've got to get sleep. You've got to have you time. You've got to take care of your mental health and your physical health, and you have to take vacations. One of the most brilliant things on the career side that happened in banking was, from a risk management perspective, they said that you had to decouple from work for 2 weeks. That was an audit requirement to make sure that there wasn't fraud. But it was the most brilliant thing that happened in my career. The ability to legitimately take 2 weeks off, not feel any guilt because I was obligated to do it, and to spend 2 whole weeks. It's that second week that made the difference and renewed me. So please take time for yourself.
Thank you, Kathy. That's amazing to see these life hacks, life tips, how to reconcile your family life and your career is absolutely amazing, particularly from you, the CEO of UBIS. Thank you, Kathy. That's highly appreciated. We are going to discuss those. I just want to give the floor, I open the floor for questions a bit later. So let's, if you don't mind, let Dr. Shanti speak now, right? And then we can have, more general discussion, and also let our students and our guests to talk as well and ask their, share their opinions and views with us. Right. Dr. Shanti, would you like?
I'd like to share the screen if it's okay with you, because my focus is basically in higher education.
Absolutely, Shanti.
I got some stats. Now, Kathy is a very tough act to follow, so I'm going to just make sure that I'm in my little narrow path. So I'm going to talk about gender gaps in higher education, especially in the United States. So the first thing is I want to show you what it looks like in terms of gender. It's still in the United States, in spite of the fact that it's 2020. The last study that was done was in 2019. We've had fewer female presidents, and Kathy is an exception to the rule. And you have to understand that there are not as many female presidents in the United States in the higher education, colleges and universities. So let me just give you a quick, sorry about this, share screen. Still getting the hang of that. Okay, share it. So if you look at it, you have the important thing in higher education, at least the goal everybody works for, and you're in a higher education faculty member, is tenure. What does mean tenure? Tenure gives you a lot of freedoms. Tenure gives us the ability to research when we want to, what we want to do, gives us the freedom to publish, gives us the freedom to teach when we like to teach, what we like to teach, etc. And we find out that 44% of the tenure track faculty and 36% of full professors, that's what we have. The women, the gender gap is there. Second, 30% of college presidents are women. But however, more than 50% of the heads of departments in the universities and colleges are women. In other words, you have a dean of arts and sciences, you have a dean of business, but to get to the president status, that's an obstacle somewhere. And the 20% gender gap. This is something we have to mention. If you are a college president, maybe except for Dr. Shirley Jackson, who is the head of Rensselaer Polytech, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she does have one of the highest paid positions as president. But most of the other college presidents who are women get paid 20% less than men in the same position, similar type of institutions, etc. So we're talking about something simple as why isn't the salary matching, even the qualifications are matching, okay? Again, there are some racial and ethnic issues too, because 5% of college presidents are racial or ethnic minorities and minority women. So again, there is this gap even between the gender. Within the gender itself, there's racial inequalities. And this continues to be a situation where, again, STEM. We have a lot of people who are qualified gender-wise, women, but still we don't make the cut in terms of tenure track engineering faculty or computer science tenure track faculty. And my daughter is a computer science major, a physics major and a computer science major. And she has told me that there is a gap, there's a gender gap in Amazon, in other blockchain programming, etc., where a person of the male persuasion gets paid more than a woman, in spite of the fact that they're both equally experienced and equally qualified. How do we stop this? So I'm going to stop sharing and then talk about my personal issues, and that this is what we are talking about, how we overcame some of our issues. I have to say that Kathy has a good set of priorities. I'll add one more, pure luck, because this is something that I have been blessed with in my life. I had an incredibly good set of parents. They stepped in, you could send a call out saying, can you please come now? And they would be there. Okay, parents, the best grandparents camp, summer. This was where my daughter was given all the attention and everything else that I could sometime make it. There was a backup all the time. My parents, friends who stepped in when she had 104 temperature and I had a board meeting could not miss, etc. And every time, and Kathy's absolutely right, the guilt eats you up. The guilt of not being there eats you up, but you have to get over it. And somewhere along the line, the communication is the most important thing. And I've been pretty lucky in terms of, I have had some really great bosses. For example, I was a single parent, I was continuing my doctoral program, and I had a full-time job. I had to leave at 2:00 on Mondays to attend my coursework. And my boss at that time was so understanding. He said, that's fine. I'll arrange your meeting, our meetings around this schedule that you had to leave in the middle of the day to get my coursework done. And gave me a lot of support then to get me through the program, the courseware and everything else. So the point is that somewhere along the line, in spite of every bit of programming and planning that you can do, if something does go wrong, you've got to have a seriously good support system in the back to actually help you get through it. And to tell you the truth, the one thing that we really want for us children is to make them independent and give them the ability to be happy by themselves, within themselves, not rely on outside. So I feel that because I've done that, I feel that I'm rather successful in spite of the single parenting, in spite of the divided attention, in spite of everything else. But there have been some compromises. And the compromises in 2002, I was offered a senior vice presidency and I did not take it. Did I regret it at that time? Yes, I did, because it would have been more pay and it was something I would have loved to do, but I didn't take it because my daughter was 7 years old. Okay, so these are things but does that guilt eat you? No, at that time, now I feel good that I didn't do it because it was a lot of pressure and I would not have been able to focus on my kid. So again, these are things that we faced as women. Then I think in 2020 or 21, the president, ex-CEO of Pepsi Cola, Indra Nooyi, wrote a book. And if I had that book then, I would have really had a lot of information that would have gotten me across some of the struggles that I had. She writes about this pyramid. She says there's a lot of women in middle management, but somewhere along the line, when as the pyramid grows up and it goes to the top, their women seem to fall out of the structure of as they build. And she's trying to understand why that happens. And a lot of times it is the lack of support. It is the lack of support in society and the lack of support within the infrastructure, lack of good childcare, all of that thing that impede the progress of careers. And we have to be lucky in our spouses. Kathy mentioned that. We have to be lucky in our spouses who will step in. We'll have to be lucky in our bosses who sometimes are understanding. And that's luck plays a part, and all of the things that Kathy mentioned plays a part. But the one thing that struck me, what Kathy said that I am guilty of, is when we have so many balls juggling up in the air, some tend to drop. Guess what? My ball was my personal health. I dropped the ball on my personal health. And I definitely advise any person, human being, man, woman, or child, listening to this conversation, please keep that in mind. If you're not there to do anything. So just don't drop your personal health, your personal well-being, and make that sacrifice, because that's critical for everybody, all the people around you. I gained 65 pounds, and that's not good. That's not a good thing. And I lost myself. And that's something that everybody here should learn. That experience, that you cannot lose yourself in all of the demands on you. So please understand that this is something that I regret, again, not guilt, regret that I did not keep everything up in the air and then I let this drop. So that's my little piece. I have more information, but I would suggest if anybody is on the career track, man or woman, please read Indra Nooyi's book, because that really is an eye-opener for a lot of us. As I said, if I had that information, I would have been a lot better, dealing with it a lot better when I was going through the career growth.
Dr. Shanti, thank you very much. I mean, just sharing very personal things with us, that's highly, immensely appreciated. Dr. Shanti, please put the book, the title, if you can, into the chat box, because Casa did. Casa, thank you very much. That would be, insightful for us, to have the list of books we have to read. Absolutely. That's very helpful. Actually, both of you raised quite interesting issues. Like Dr. Shanti, I absolutely agree with you that luck is definitely, has a role to play, and quite a big one, right? But what Kathy mentioned was very interesting, that the hard time usually, right, at our job place, women give hard time to women in employment. And that's very true as well. And even I tell you more, at UBIS already, I taught a leadership course, at master's level. And we spoke about leadership. And I just mentioned like, oh, by the way, would you prefer to have a male boss or a female boss? And we had a small poll, right? And all women on that course, imagine that, like I mean it, all of them, they mentioned that they would prefer to have a male boss at their job place. So that was the situation. So that's quite interesting, right? Anyhow, Diana, please, if you share with us, because you are the younger generation of successful women who managed to combine employment, family, motherhood, and DBA. God's sake, Dr. Shanti, talking about juggling the balls, right? So Diana is definitely a bright example. So Diana, go ahead, share with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santalova, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this forum. I think when I listen to both Kathleen and Shanti, there's so much that really resonates for me. Maybe what I can add is, the problems of the first world and the problems of the developing world are just a little bit different, though our issues are largely the same. And maybe what I can just differentiate is just to give you a little background about Kenya. So Kenya is a very, it's a middle-income country. It has become a middle-income country, a lower middle-income country. So we have about 44.9% of ourselves are in the middle class, and middle class is people earning between $216 to $1,094. About 30% of Nairobi, the capital city, is in the middle class. And we had a new constitution in 2010 that put down that there is a 2/3 gender rule. So in any of the public institutions and government, etc., you must have at least 1/3 women representation, which has been a bit of a hurdle. It's something that we're working hard towards. But at the same time, in fact, I've listened to your comments, especially on what Dr. Patterson had to say, and it is true. What I get to hear as a young woman from when I was in university coming up was never so much career. It was always, when are you going to have a family? And some of the negative sentiments that I heard coming up in my career as a woman were, you're so aggressive. Why are you so aggressive when I'm trying to get something done? How will you get married if you're always at work? The only reason that you shine is because you don't have a family yet. You know, the rest of us who are managing our families, it's so much harder for us. And even there's a guy who told me, I don't know how you'll become a wife. You know, my wife has to iron my shirts and wash my clothes herself. So we're lucky as a middle income economy that nanny services and maid services are very affordable. Just about anyone can afford to get that service. But there comes this other thing where someone says, no, I don't want a maid to wash my clothes. It has to be you. And I was like, right. And when you talk about how women bring other women down, there was a point where I was looking for somebody to assist my role. And when I was looking at the pool of people who were available, one of the women managers told me, don't work with her. She has too many children and therefore she's very unreliable. And I said to myself, I don't like the sound of that. I think those are not my values. And when you talk about personal values and what you want and how you want to be in the workplace, I always thought to myself, at the point in time when I become a mother in the workplace, I don't want that to be the limiting factor that people look at me. So I did choose that lady. And the most interesting thing happened because she has been one of the greatest teachers to me about work-life balance. So this lady had 4 children and she came on board. And the reason I decided to work with her is I was having a conference and I was getting some cross-functional teams coming in, and I needed somebody to help me do icebreakers and get people together and do some of the administration. And she volunteered and she did such a good job. And she also thought outside the box, and I was like, wow, I like the way you think. And which is why I had said I want her in the first place to work with me. Now, when we ended up working together, she got pregnant again. And before she went on her maternity leave, I was telling her, let's plan and let's see who's going to sit in for you and, you know, what do you want us to do? And the interesting thing about this lady, we used to publish a weekly, we had a weekly publication from our department, which is something she managed. She had done all the weekly publications for the time that she was going to be away. So that, you know, in the way that she planned her life, I just remember thinking, it's so crazy. Everything was done. She had, for the different departments that we interfaced with, she had talked to them about how they were going to put their work together. She had gotten somebody who was going to compile it. So really me looking to say, let me help you plan how we're going to manage your time when you're on maternity. There wasn't anything to manage. She had done it herself. She had put a lot of structure and a lot of things were done in advance. And I was so impressed with her. And I remember thinking to myself, imagine if I hadn't gone along with her, and look at her going through this situation again and how she has managed to plan it. So this inspired me. When I became pregnant and when I was going to go on leave, I did the same thing for my boss. And I remember him thinking, wow, I had, so I manage a retail function and I have 14 countries and I have, you know, deliverables against profitability, against service, and against other things for retail. And what I did was, before I left, we had this huge workshop, and I just went through, these are all the things you're required to do. Let's do the definition of what we want to achieve this year. Come up with what your targets are going to be. And I did it in such a way that even by the time I came back from maternity leave, my interface with people was very light. And thankfully, we were still in COVID times, so I was at home working for most of the time. We've just started traveling again, because my work has a lot of travel in it. But it was because of working with people like the lady that I'm telling you about that I realized having a career doesn't mean sacrificing your family, or having your family doesn't mean sacrificing your career. And I think Shanti and Kathleen put it very eloquently, that you must have the support and the backup. And for me, I have quite a few hats. I think, like you said, I'm the group lead of retail at Bharti Airtel across 14 countries. I'm a DBA student at UBIS. I'm a regional council member for Africa for the Customer Experience Professionals Association. For the Institute of Customer Experience in Kenya, I'm in the Sustainability Committee. I'm a chair of judges for the International Customer Experience Awards. I'm chair of judges for the UK Customer Experience Awards. I'm a judge for the Customer Centricity World Series. And for my alumni association, I am also the treasurer. But what helps me make all these things possible, and the ability to maybe participate and contribute in these different things, in the organization that I worked in previously, we had a Women in Leadership course that they put us through. And it was so thought-provoking, because the number one thing that they told us is there's a difference between getting it done and doing it yourself. Yeah, and delegation is important. It's not only important because it helps you manage many things, but you also get to grow the people beneath you, and they get to exercise their muscles and their skills. And one of the things I remember is that at any point in time, whatever seat you're sitting in, if you're the only person who can do that work, there will never be an opportunity for you to jump into the next seat. You always have to prove that there's somebody ready to jump into my seat. And if you're not able to empower people to that level, then you will always stay where you are. And that was just mind-blowing for me from that Women in Leadership course. And that's something that I now put in place. And it actually has given me the ability to move. I think the last 3 promotions that I've had have been because I've been able to make sure that there is continuity wherever I have been. The second thing is we had fantastic workplace mentorship programs. And I think it's also in then teaching the next person that you have to give some grace to the people you work with. So you start by being the change you want to see, and letting people see that that is possible, and finding a way to work with people. And getting that mentorship myself. I got it both from male and female colleagues, senior colleagues above me, which really helped me. And then in my personal life, I have some women's groups that I have that are also supporting, because as a woman, sometimes you can't always get your information from your family or your close friends. So there was a breastfeeding mothers support group that really helped me through the first 6 months with my baby, and trying to understand what are some of the things that I need. There was a lactation specialist. There were other mothers going through the same thing. At 2 o'clock in the morning, we're texting each other and supporting each other, and that really helps. There's also the Women on Boards. In Kenya, we have the Women on Boards Association, which I'm part of, and their main thing is to promote and encourage women into board leadership. So they do training, governance, placements. People always come to them and say, we need a woman for a board. How do we do this? And so I'm looking in 2022, I will also be sitting on a board somewhere. And the real, maybe the one quotation, and I remember just after listening to this, it opened my mind, and it told me, you know, you have to just think outside the box. Anything is possible. It's a quotation that we say is from Nelson Mandela, and I want to just read it out to you. But he's very famous for saying it. But the person who actually said it in the beginning was Marianne Williamson, and she's an American writer. That it goes like, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and famous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that people won't feel insecure around you. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in all of us. And when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And I'd say that that's what most inspires me. And just as a final, the other women, there are women in my life who have inspired me. For example, my mother, who was a CEO of an American multinational company. I have an auntie who was a chairlady of one of the largest banks and a board member of the largest telco. We had a Nobel Peace Prize laureate in our country, Wangari Maathai, our new Chief Justice in Kenya for the first time, first female Chief Justice. Her name is Martha Koome. The Nairobi County Governor. Nairobi is the largest city and the capital of Kenya. Her name is Anne Kananu, she's a woman. Our former Minister of Defense and Foreign Affairs, who has now moved to energy, her name is Monica Juma. She has done so much transformational work that the president said energy is where we now need the most transformation, and she was moved there. And we have top multinational firms that are now putting women in as CEOs. So just also seeing all these women and all the wonderful things that they're doing continues to give me the impetus to do what I need to do.
Thank you, Diana. That's absolutely amazing. Yes, I also do feel like, yes, round of applause. No, really, Diana, very, very impressive. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. We already have a hand up, and that's Tracy. And Tracy, you're joining us from Vietnam, am I right?
That's right.
Tracy, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy, and I am Vietnam in Asia at the moment. I work UBIS MBA alumni, and now I study PhD with UBIS. Today, I feel so lucky because I think I am a very lucky student in a university that have women empowerment and some great female leaders like Dr. Shanti and Kathleen and Dr. Antonio. I'm so impressed, and it's also meaningful to me to sit down here and listen to this topic about gender gap. And the last week section, my thesis is about female leadership, and it is so meaningful for me. I just want to share my story in Asia. I think it's a little bit different with other continents where you're living now. So in Vietnam, and other Asian countries like Korea and Japan, and especially Chinese, the role and the position of the woman somehow is more. I don't say it's serious like in Africa, but they're still very unfair in the workplace and how the society looking at a woman right now. However, Vietnam is a special country. We don't know why, but maybe in the culture, because the Vietnamese people, they see how much important woman is. So it's really easy for me to looking around of my life to see my mom as a successful businesswoman, and many leaders, they are female in Vietnam. Just whether they want to be a leader or not, whether they want to work more or not, or they happy with the role as a mother. And I think that this can be the strength. It also can be the weakness of any woman. When men also love the kids. I don't say the woman love the kids better, but somehow we see we have to be responsible for the family. We have to be responsible for the kids. So I have a story. When I was on the fresh graduate from university for bachelor, and I worked for Australian government in Vietnam. I worked under the Ministry of Trade of Australian government, and after I worked there for 6 months, so they promoted me to be the youngest manager in the world of the system of Australia government. So at that time, I only 23 years old, and I worked there for about 8 years after they promoted me to be a director level of an international system. And that is also right. And many people in Vietnam call me the gifted. However, when I have a first child, then my boss come to me, and he is Australian gentleman, a man, and he come to me and say, Jan, your job is all about you have to travel. So you have to travel to Australia, you have to travel to Asia, you have to talk, you have to be the speaker, and you have to travel a lot of cities in Vietnam. And now you were pregnant, and I don't believe you can handle your jobs. So can you think about, how think about us, can you think about our business, and can you wrap out of this job? And you can imagine at that time, like a successful woman having a really, really smooth career, how hurt, when he said that to me. So that's not only because of my fault, not only because of how much productivity I do for my job, not about my achievement that I did for them like 10 to 12 years, but about my baby, my pregnancy. So it really hurt me at that time. So, and at that time, because I was young, I don't understand the international law. So I don't sue them at all. I quit my job. I take the compensation that they gave to me. I had my baby, and I decided that I would never want to be employed again. So I opened my company, and in the company, I set a rule that in here the women are respected. I will support the woman, and in here we're gonna be bias for the woman leader. So if anyone wants to be a leader and they are female, then they have more priority than, they have more support than any boy. So from a $500,000 US company, after 7 years, we raised at $20 million US at the moment. And in our companies, oh my God, the more it's expanded, the more employee we have to employ. So we have about 150 women at the moment. 95% of the gender are female.
Wow, that's very important. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing this. All the success stories are really, really inspirational. Thank you, Tracy. I wanted kind of to put a bit of not critical perspective, but anyway, if you let me share very quickly one slide. Many speakers spoke about delegation, but there is one job that fortunately or unfortunately women cannot really delegate, can we? And that's giving birth. And that's just one slide that Kathy kindly shared with me, and I wanted to show, and that's the decline in the US birth rate, but it's the trend all over the world, right? And that's what's happening. And we already discussed this trend and how harmful, if you wish, it can be to the economies and to countries. And we spoke about Japan in this regard in particular, but that's not only these countries, right? So in order to discuss this aspect, that yes, on one hand, of course, trust me, being a woman myself, being a mother of 2 daughters, I have no doubts at all in the leadership qualities, in the potential girls I have, but there are some facts in place, and maybe Professor Gilbert would be kind to share with us the insights, from the social policy perspective into this issue. Professor Neil Gilbert. Lovely, Neil.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Antonina. This is a very stimulating conversation. I'd like to respond to 2 issues that have been brought up, but first, if I can just share the screen for a second, I can explain the mystery of the birth rate going down in the United States.
Okay.
Can I have a screen share?
You definitely can.
Let's see. Okay.
Isn't it amazing when there is somebody on the call who can explain you the mystery?
Yeah, here's the mystery. This is 18 to 34-year-olds who have had no sex during the last year in the United States. And as you see, after 1910, the curve has gone up dramatically. There's people are just not getting together. They don't have sex, they're not going to have children. But I would like to take the opportunity to respond to two other questions, which are related to the question of the declining birth rate, because one of it has to do with how you spend your time. And I enjoyed Peterson's comments, and I enjoyed Kathy's response to them. But I think that what's lacking here is a perspective on social class. So most of the people on this Zoom meeting would probably agree with Kathy that, you know, work is enjoyable. I would say that there's a big social class element. Work is not enjoyable for a majority of people, and that most women, in fact, don't want to work full time. There are lots of surveys that are done asking women what they prefer, and it turns out that the majority would want to work part-time. Why is that? I think the reason is because unlike the group here, where everybody's going for their PhD, it's a very accomplished group. This is, by all accounts, what I would call in the upper echelons, upper class, if not necessarily in income, certainly in education, and in the opportunities to work that allows. Most work over time is boring and repetitious, not only for women, but for men. And empirically, it's true. I can prove it to you. Just ask yourself the question, why do men retire? Men, why do they retire from work throughout the industrialized world long before the standard age of requirement to receive Social Security? One of the reasons Social Security systems throughout the advanced welfare states are in trouble is because people retire early. Why in France do they go out and have these huge demonstrations? Because they want to maintain the age of retirement to 55. Who the hell retires at 55? Well, I'll tell you one thing. Professors don't retire at 55. Journalists don't retire. CEOs, people who have their PhDs, people like the group here don't necessarily want to retire at 55. But the vast majority of people are not this group. It's a different class. I was interested, Kathy, you mentioned how to be successful, how to manage the kind of work to become a CEO. And the answer was outsource. Outsource, you have to have daycare, you have to have maid service. Who's doing that work? And do the people for whom this work is outsourced, are they enjoying it that much? There are lots of surveys. Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist or psychologist, depends on what he wants to call him, did a big study asking women who were working to keep diaries about how they felt, how much enjoyment they had during the day. And the answer was most of them enjoyed being home with their children. And the thing that they enjoyed less than being at work was commuting to work. That was the thing that they had the least enjoyment of. So it's not for this group, and that's the problem. If I ask people, most people who write and think and talk about the issue say, oh, work is really exciting, it's valuable, it's meaningful. And that's because they write and they think and they talk for a living. They're like me, and like many of you, they don't have real jobs. They don't, and I'm not saying you don't work hard. I work very hard, but they have temporal autonomy. They don't have to get up, get in a car, drive an hour to work, be there at 9 o'clock, have an hour off for lunch, stay there till 5, do pretty much the same thing. Go downtown in whatever towns and cities you're in, walk through the stores and look at all the people standing behind the counters, serving things and asking yourself, are they really enjoying work? So I think there's a big social class issue, and for many people, work is not that enjoyable. The second issue I'd like to bring up has to do with with the meaning of work. One thing everyone seems to ignore is the fact that women work when they're not in the market economy. Gary Becker, another Nobel Prize, I'll cite the Nobel Prize winners to give myself a little more authority in this matter. But Gary Becker is another Nobel Prize winning economist, and Stein Ringen, who was the director of the social policy program at Oxford, both of them independently have written about this issue. And they say, if you look at the value of household production, that is, look what somebody who has a child at a household is doing, it's tremendous. It doesn't get counted in the GDP. So when somebody makes dinner in the house, it doesn't count. If they go and they work in McDonald's and they're getting a salary, they're working. If they care for their children in the house, it doesn't count. If they drop their children off at a daycare center and then go to another daycare center where they're working, it counts as part of the GDP. They say that the estimates are household production is worth something like $100,000 a year. They are chauffeurs, they are daycare, they are cooks, they are cleaners, they are computer operators, vast number of activities that have to be outsourced if they go into the market to work in the market economy. And again, I'm not talking about people with their PhDs who can afford to purchase and outsource their activities. I'm talking about the vast middle classes in society. And empirically, I did a study about California, and it turns out if you look at the median income that women earn in California, and then you look at the cost of going to work if you have children. In California today, daycare costs are about over $20,000 a year for daycare for young children. You have 2 kids under 5, you've got $40,000 you've got to pay for daycare. There are costs involved in taxes when you go to work. There's commuting costs. There's costs for outsourcing all the activities because you don't have time to make dinners. So you're buying pre-made foods. When you add it all up, and I'm not the only one who's done this, the OECD has done a study of Europe, and the answers are pretty much the same. People earning the median income in California make something like 10 cents on the dollar by going to work, as opposed to offering the same kind of production through the household. So for a lot of people, the market economy and that work isn't that satisfying and that economically rewarding. It is for, Peterson called it the elite, I wouldn't say the elite, but for people in the upper echelons, which is basically this group. I could rattle on for another half hour, but I will stop right now.
I know you can. I know you can. Thank you very much. I knew that you would give us another turn in our discussion. That's fascinating, Neil. Thank you very much. Yes, and we have, please, the floor is open, everybody. Let's share. So, Viola, yes, I see your hand. Go ahead, Viola.
Morning, good afternoon. It is such a pleasure to listen to all of you, and it's very inspiring. So I'm calling in from, I'm the academic dean of UBIS. And for any of the DBA students I have not met yet, it's great to meet you in this meeting. And it's very inspiring to listen to both all of the speakers. And I would say that as a woman who has, who's raising a child, who also has an academic career, and who has had the opportunity to work in a university led by women, I have to say I'm very proud it is led by women. And the other thing I wanted to say is that one of the things that I was thinking about listening to all of you is the fact that I have a dear friend of mine who did her PhD at the University of Geneva in the Department of Economics. And her PhD thesis was on the topic of job sharing. She wrote a book about it. I'll give you her reference. She has a website. She started a company actually about job sharing. So in a country that is, considered as, I wouldn't say a poster child of equal opportunities, because Switzerland is actually more conservative than some might think. If you look at, some of the stats, and I'm not going to share more stats, but basically in Switzerland, female employees will earn about 20% less than their male counterparts, even though there is a law that says, and this was voted in through parliamentarian, processes, that women and men should earn the same amount. So now the debate is, how do you enforce it? What can you do about it to actually make it equal? But so my feeling about this, and I had lots of discussions with Dr. German about what she was pushing forward. So she has three kids, and she raised the 3 kids, and she put forward this job sharing model, where in fact, maybe not so much what Dr. Gilbert was referring to, where you have, the cleaner. It's difficult to do job sharing at that level, maybe. So it might be possible to do actually part-time work, and Switzerland is among the champions of part-time work. So job sharing, what's that about? It's about leadership positions, but also further down positions that are being shared. And so the idea is that there are 2 for 1, okay? So it's not so easy to get this through at some level, because at government, actually, Irenka German, she managed to do it. She put forward the fact that she, as a woman with 3 small kids, could actually have a counterpart with 1 child in this case, and that the 2 were more effective than 1. And it became actually something you could see on television in Switzerland. Why? Why was it more effective? Well, because the 2, if they work together well, they are actually getting done more for roughly the same amount of money. So we're talking about 60% and 60% maybe. So that's 120, it's slightly more than 100. But if one of them is abroad, and in her case, she worked for the State Department and the Department of Economics. So she needed to travel a lot. So while she was away, somebody would be there to pick up the phone. Somebody would be able to job share and come in with solutions when she was away. So, and this has gone further, and obviously at some levels, for example, at the United Nations, some managers, male for many, will not like this solution. They say, oh, but who is in charge?
Right.
I say.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you. Again, the examples you've just provided, again, we're talking about this elite, right? And Professor Gilbert nicely emphasized that. I mean, talking about preferences and choices, well, maybe there are more for those who can afford those, right? But I would like to turn us back to Professor Gilbert's notion whether the governments should rather promote and kind of motivate women get into paid employment, or rather maybe the state might think about how to appreciate the jobs women do anyway, within the households, and just to show this appreciation in the monetary expression. And in this regard, Dr. Shanti asks a very reasonable question to you, Professor Gilbert, about child credits. If you have a look, please, at the question. But meanwhile, Mashilo, I would be very interested in your opinion. Go ahead. Mashilo, you're on mute.
Thanks, Prof. and the colleagues. I'll give you the perspective of gender inequality in South Africa. Gender inequality in Africa, it's like in other African countries, it was it came over from the previous colonized government or institute. So in South Africa, after 1994, that is after the dawn of the new democracy, the government realized that this was a thorn. They established a policy which dealt with the gender inequality. This policy was supposed to be used across the private and public sector. Now, in the public sector, it is working because the salaries are equal. If the job is advertised for specific job, the salaries and benefits will go to whoever get the job. And also, they encourage the departments of the government or SOEs, that the state-owned enterprises, to employ more women to reach at least 50%. Now, the government itself in parliament and local government municipalities are also pushing hard since since around 1999. That was the second term of the new government. They are pushing for 50% of parliamentarians to be women. In the local government, where the municipalities are operating, the government is pushing for 50% of women as councillors and so on. Now, in private, it is still a stigma. And to me, I think this comes as a culture that because men are head of the families, when they come to work, they still want to be men. And because of the culture of secret element, men feel more comfortable to be amongst themselves than with women as colleagues, because then they cannot share all what they would love to, and that should stop. Then, as I, yes.
Sorry for interruption. It's quite interesting. So there is some conspiracy, right? That men prefer like boys club and rather, stay within this boys club. And I think the notion of culture is also very important. Sorry, I've interrupted your thought. Did you have anything to
I just wanted to conclude by listing the issues that will then affect a woman under especially the private sector. Then a woman will end up getting less pay for the same job that men are doing, and they also suffer from the sexual harassment because men look at women not as colleagues but rather objects. Then they also suffer from racial discrimination because Black men in South Africa, in the new government, will resist from racism practice from a white male colleague. So women become the soft targets for the white bosses in the working situation. Then the other one is that women in the private sector are less promoted compared to their counterpart of men. And the last one is that women find themselves under severe pressure because they've got to do twice or thrice than what the men are producing in order to convince the boss, the employer, that they can also do the same. That's the Prof. Thank you.
Rashida, thank you very much. I think.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
Antonina?
sure. Go ahead.
Can I just say to you that was exactly the way it was in the States 20 years ago? Okay, so I grew up, I was always the only woman in the room. I always had to work harder. I always had to do things to stand out. And so what I think we're talking about is the economic and social maturity of countries. And I think that hopefully what we'll see is the examples that you've just given, which I experienced, but you don't experience as much now in the US. I had a male colleague say to me, well, you're just going to have babies and stay home. Why should I invest in you? I could tell you stories that would be unfathomable in this day and age and that I directly personally experienced. So I think to your point, I definitely believe that that is being experienced in different countries. But as their infrastructure improves, as their economic perspectives improve, as their society, matures into thinking about men and female, in male and female in a different way, I think you'll see change.
That's one. Yes, I agree, Kathy. That's absolutely true. We have a message in the chat box from Hussein, who says that actually the cooperation of both spouses is required in order to reconcile motherhood and employment. And we have one family joining us as a wife and a husband, and that's Helen and Martin from London. So Shelter, if you don't mind, I let Martin and Helen speak first, okay? So maybe if you could share the insights, how you managed, to kind of support each other over this, I'm sure not easy times very often, right? Because I know Helen has got a PhD. Marty had got masters, so Martin, I believe, supported Helen in this, right? So if you could share.
Well, I would just like to say that I'm rather old now, but I could also tell hair-raising stories of things that had been said to me when I was much younger and trying to make my way. I would, however, like to make a remark in response to Professor Gilbert's, the gentleman in the beautiful book-lined room, I always like book-lined rooms, who was commenting on the sheer expense that women have to go to in order to get their childcare organized. And I know this from personal experience. We have 2 sons and I was out at work all the time. And at one point I was making hardly any profit because it all went in childcare. But I would like to make the point that in the end, it was worthwhile, because if you do take, as a woman, 5, 6, 7 years out to bring up the little one until it goes to school, until it's in its primary school or something like that, and if you have 2 or 3, it's a little bit longer, then if you have not been at work, you haven't been paying into your pension, you haven't been furthering your career, you've been at home, doubtless doing the very worthwhile job of bringing up the child. But in the meantime, you've fallen back in a way that you may never make up. And I think that this is largely responsible for the way that at the end of their working lives, women tend not to be in such a good financial position as men. Many have chosen to to stay at home, to do that work at home. It is work. And they don't recover financially. Did you have anything to add to this?
Well, no, but we did have help.
We had help. We paid for it, but we didn't make a lot of money out. Out of my going to work because we were paying. But in the long run, there were other benefits. Sorry.
Well, my mother went out to work from day one pretty well. When she had me, my grandmother sort of was the backup. So I was quite relaxed about Helen going out to work. The thing is that it's partly a question of what are you good at? And I think that the woman we chose as a childminder had a family of her own, and her husband wouldn't let her have any more children because they couldn't afford it. So our children became their children. And this woman was set up in the garden with the toys, and she was mothering was what she wanted to do. Helen wanted to do a PhD, and these are different things. And Aristotle, not Aristotle, I do mean Aristotle. Yes, he said, well, you should each do what you're good at. Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you. Shelter. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Martin. Shelter.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Santalova. I first of all want to say a very big thank you to Kathleen, Dr. Gilbert, and our colleague from UBIS, who made a very important presentation. I'm a very passionate person about women. Any issue about women is so important to me. And because I know how useful roles women, a woman, particular woman who is my mother, played in my success in life. And somehow, sometime I will have the opportunity, not today, to share the story of my mother, how she helped me to be who I am today. I want to start by saying that there is a saying which goes like, behind every successful man is a woman. And by the same parity of reasoning, there is also behind every successful woman, there is a man. I find the group that we are discussing issues about women very, very privileged. And I wonder how many women in rural Ghana, or where I come from, will be able to even articulate their own issues. So one thing is coming out very clear to me. It is education and exposure. It is important for our women, particularly from childhood, to be able to have access to education, to be knowledgeable, to be analytical, and to make the good choices in life. Sometimes you find that women make decisions in marriage, they are forced into marriage, and then you find out that the marriage actually destroys the personality and then the future of the woman. And so because of the lack of knowledge and to make the real choices, I, on this occasion, want to doff my hat to the very thousands and millions of women in rural parts of the world who are struggling on a daily basis to eke out a living with their families. Those are the women whose voices must be heard. Those are the women who must become the focus of our, approach, our efforts to elevate and to raise up the profile of women. I believe that a forum like this would provide opportunity for us to focus on what is actually going on in other parts of the world, particularly where women are marginalized, their voices are not heard, they kind of form the minority. And it is also very, very clear that the whole world, particularly on my side as a man, we cannot allow 50% of the population to remain in the kitchen. We have to bring them out. We have to let them participate. Let them provide the support that we need to make a better world. Thank you, Dr. Satolova.
Thank you, Shatter. Very inspiring. Thank you. And I absolutely agree with you that, for women on low income and rural areas in particular, I think it was never the opportunity to choose much or to think about what preferences they have. They have to work, to make their families survive. So that's true. And Professor Gilbert, I saw your hand up. Don't be shy. So if you could, because we're about to finish, we have like 4 minutes left. So if you could have some conclusive remarks, you're welcome.
No, just one last comment. Because I think the point about if you stay home for 5, 6, 7 years to raise children while they're very young, it does mean that it's unlikely that you might become a CEO or a Supreme Court justice or a physicist. There are many occupations that will be out of reach for someone who stays home 5 years. But most people, the vast majority of people aren't Supreme Court justice or physicists or PhDs. For many women and men indeed, because we're living longer, we have a longer opportunity to work during our lives. Staying home 5 years will leave us another 45, 50, 60 years to bore ourselves silly working in the market economy. And so for people who want to choose that, and I'm not saying this group who wants to go on and get their PhDs, I'm talking about for people who are looking at, well, my option is I can go to work in Safeway, or I can go to work in the department store, I can stay home for 5 years with my child, and the most important years of their development, I can shape their values, their cognitive development. I can care for them. I think people ought to have that choice. And I don't think they'll end up sort of much worse off. Government can encourage people having a choice by saying, this is a job. And if you don't send your child to a daycare that we're paying you for, we'll give you cash for care to stay home. And some countries have started programs like that. The Scandinavian countries have cash for care programs. And Germany had it, although there was great resistance by women by the elite, by the upper class women who said, well, if you give the choice, it will retard women's progress. And so they got the federal government in Germany to rescind this program. But I think giving people the choice is right, and people who think they would like an exciting career and have the capacity and ability and drive can do that. And people who would end up working in 90 or 70% of the jobs that aren't all that exciting and would like to say, I'd like to spend 5 to 7 years caring for my children, should be able to do that, and they should be equal. There shouldn't be pressure on one side to do one or on the other side to do the other.
Right.
The point I wanted to make was that you're absolutely right, Professor Gilbert, but the choice should not be just for the women. The tax credit or the cash for care should be a choice for both men or women. That was the question. I mean, it shouldn't be just give the women money to stay at home. No, give the men money to stay at home too. I'm pretty sure I know at least 4 or 5 guys in my own age group who would have loved to stay at home and take care of their kids while they went to work. But it was just not the norm.
I agree entirely, Shanti. In fact, in the United States today, in 200 families, about 20% of the earners in 200 families, women are higher earners than men. And in those cases, the rational, if you say one of us should stay home for 5 years, we want to have the family, the rational thing would be for men to do that. And I know families and men are doing it also. I still think at the end of the day, they will be in a minority, but I do think the choice should be available. I agree.
Thank you both. I see Diana's hand. She wants to add to the discussion. Diana, to this particular issue, right?
Yes. I think, Dr. Gilbert, I feel that there's a point of bias on your part whereby, for myself, even if you term me elite or whatever the case may be, if I took 5 years of work, I don't have a chance in my career. And I think the point is, even for women who are doing their work, even if she's in Safeways and she's been the cashier for 5 years, if she did her work diligently for those 5 years, when the store supervisor part comes up, then she gets recognition for that. The issue is for women and whether they want to work or not. And I think Shanti's right, like, yes, give it to men or women, but in having that solid experience and having been, remember I said there was someone who was termed not reliable, yeah, and having been reliable for an extra longer period of time then affords you an opportunity to move up. Whether it is moving from being the messenger to the store clerk, whether it's from being the clerk to the store supervisor, from the store supervisor to the manager, it makes a very big difference. I think that's my experience, that's what I've seen. And I think, yes, having money versus, and these are some of the things that then bring guilt to women. Like I told you, right now I'm in Zambia. I had to travel on Saturday and I was very upset because the only flights that come to Zambia from Kenya on Saturday is at 1 p.m. On Sunday arrives at 1 a.m. and then I'd have a flight in Zambia at 6 a.m. to go to another part of Zambia where I have to go for where the work that I'm coming to do. So I had to leave my baby on Saturday instead of leaving on Monday morning like everybody else would when they're going to work. But sometimes you have to make that decision because I know that if I don't participate in some of these activities, then my reliability and my ability to be effective in the job that I do will be questioned. And thereafter, where I'm put in the pecking order of who is reliable in this job or who's showing the commitment and the rest of those things comes into question. I don't believe also that I have made a sacrifice in my baby's safety or happiness. She is 11 months old. I have a fantastic nanny who takes care of her every single day of the week and who provides the love and security that she requires at this point in time to know that when she wakes up, she's safe, she will get food, she will cook for her, and the rest of those things. So yes, there are some of those things that I can't do for her right now, but what it is affording me to do for her in the future is more important.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Olga, I'm not able to take your question, but we are going to continue the discussion, okay? And today we agreed that both men and women should have choice and should be able to express their preferences. What we have not discussed, what is the best for the child? And I believe so that should be the second or the next topic for the discussion for the following sessions. Meanwhile, thank you very much for your participation, for your insightful contribution and sharing your personal experiences with us. Please take the best care of yourselves and your loved ones. And I see you next Sunday. Keep an eye on our advertisements. So have a nice rest of Sunday. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know what they're
Patricia, that's Patricia.